right, good morning. I am Colonel Matt Brannen, once again, Deputy Director for Operations. I'm going to talk a little bit, overview of what we do. My job as the Deputy Director for Operations is oversee execution of the agency's global mission. I just kind of want to start with a little bit of gratitude. This will be, if you dialed in or were at the Kansas City FMU, you heard that that was going to be my last one. And then if you were at Billings, you heard that was going to be my llast one. But I can assure you this is my last one. I will be executing orders on July 29th, checking into 1st Marine Division. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity in 26 years of service. I just had a visit, and the deputy commander for Indo-PACOM accompanied the gentleman who was visiting us. And he basically said, I can't think of another mission in the Department of Defense that is more noble or honorable as the mission that we have here at DPAA. And I couldn't agree more with that. This has been an honor of my career. I kind of think 3 years ago, I did my very first event 3 years ago was the Vietnam War annual government briefing. I had checked in about 2 or 3 weeks before the event. I was super nervous because I heard, this family knows the most about the mission. They know the most about their cases. And I think I muddled through a little bit. I might have got a little emotional. It's kind of hard to follow the folks today with Jessica, right? Jessica, yep, and the presentation to the family members. I like to try to start lighthearted, but it just, I was trying to read the room, so it's a little heavier than I thought. And I left the clicker laying on a table somewhere, so if anyone has it, great. There it is. Somebody asked me to pin on, and I totally lost the clicker. So, all right. But it really has been the honor of my career. And I just want to say, right, I understand, like, one of the first things I did when I got to the agency was I wanted to learn about the history. I read through the congressional hearings. I read through reports. I read through all I could gather about this mission, and really, the start of this mission really born out of the efforts of the families, represented here today, many of them, and it grew to Korean War, World War II, and keeping that promise to never leave a service member behind. Really, I can't summon the words to say how much this has meant to me. But I'd also like to say the men and women that work at DPAA are some of the most passionate people that I have ever worked with, day in and day out, and they're always thinking about how we can be better. I challenge them every day, like how can we be better today than we were yesterday? We look at ways to improve. We look to ways to gain effectiveness and efficiency, and it just, as a leader, oftentimes you try to get you want to inspire folks into action, to believe in what they're doing. You don't have that problem in this agency. I actually feel like I sometimes have the other problem is people are so passionate about it that they get emotional. And when we get emotional, we lose objectivity and reason. We understand that you're emotional, and rightfully so. The government made mistakes. They were not forthcoming, right? And those kind of scars that you carry, really, it's understandable. I will say that if we know information about your case, we are going to give it to you. We work tirelessly. Our researchers, historians, the backbone of what we do is historical research and analysis. Before I even get a team to the field, we got to have a good idea where we're going to investigate. And once we do an investigation and we get what we call correlate the site, right, where we talked about that a little bit yesterday, a correlated site would be an example, an aircraft loss. We find a tail number a data plate, something that has a serial number that tells me this is a specific aircraft, this is the aircraft. I can look at the historical records and know the crew that was associated with that aircraft. So now we come back and we do an excavation proposal to get that case ready for a recovery. That is an iterative process. We do recoveries. We may get a site or go to a site and it yields nothing. That site may get removed from the excavation list. That doesn't mean the case is over. We go back to the investigation side. We go do more work. And I say the backbone of what this organization does is that historical research and analysis. And the heartbeat of this agency is the identification process, the scientific analysis, the things that our laboratory does. That's the heart of this agency. If you ever have a chance to come to Hawaii and visit the laboratory there, you'll see that building was purpose-built for this mission. Suspended over a memorial atrium is a room that is at the heart of the building, and it is the family viewing room. That's the place where, if your loved one's identified, you have the opportunity to travel there. We will bring out the remains of your loved one, and you can sit down with the historian, the analyst that worked your case, the anthropologist who worked the case, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. It's really, that room, if you don't get chills every time you walk in it and think about the stories that could be told about service members that we've accounted for, it really, I don't know, check your pulse, I guess. And that's what we want for all of you. I mean, that's right. That's the ultimate goal, is to account for your loved ones. Before I start, because everybody's like, oh, you're leaving, what's going to happen? Who's your replacement? So let me just real quickly introduce you the continuity of the front office, the deputy director for front office. 9 months ago, I hired, we had about 100 applicants for my senior operations position. I interviewed 12 people, I believe it was, and we hired Mr. John Figueres. It's not Figuera, it's not Figueres, Figueres. It took me a while to figure out how to say that right. Fig, we call him Fig because nobody can say his last name properly, or you call him John. Yeah. So Fig is a retired Navy captain. He served 33 years in the Navy. He worked at Indo Pacific Command. He worked at Marine Forces Pacific, which he told me was the greatest job he ever had, working with Marines. So, you know, from a naval officer, pretty impressive. And then he worked at Pacific Fleet. He was the commanding officer of the Reuben James, and he was a CO. His last job, I believe, was CO for Float Training Group, Middle Pacific. He has extensive knowledge and experience in the Indo-Pacific. And he has just jumped in, hit the ground running, and I feel pretty confident that we're working a transition plan for him to be ready to step in and fill in until a replacement is identified for my position. But Fig, do you want to say anything?
Thank you, Matt. And really, I am not happy to see him go. But I also am concerned. I don't want to let the agency or the families down. And I'll just leave it at that, that this is a mission. I was almost ready to retire my second time, but when this opportunity came up, I actually told my old boss, sorry boss, Pacific Fleet, I've been given a better offer. And it has turned out to be just that. So I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to continuing this great work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, brother. You're in good hands with Fig over there, I promise you. All right, so we got a lot of new family members. So you guys that have been here last year, you know this. This is a picture of my dad. One of those pictures in Vietnam. He did 2 tours in Vietnam, 68, 70. I come from a family of military service. Not only that, my wife retired next month will be 4 years ago as a Marine 06 colonel. She was an F-18 pilot. I'll say this because I'm super proud of her, and she gets mad at me when I say this, but she doesn't like to talk about it. But she was the first female Marine fighter pilot. So she has that distinct honor, I guess. You could... And her wings that she got on her winging in 1997 were World War II naval aviator wings that one of her cousins who was shot down and killed was pinned on. So she comes from a family of service. Her father was in the Marine Corps and then decided to go to the Army. I don't know why, right? I guess he wasn't ready to be a Marine yet, right? A-R-M-Y, aren't ready to be Marines yet. Yeah, totally kidding. I love the Army. He was a Green Beret in the Army. My dad served my little brother, who's 6'6", so he's like 4 inches taller than I am, served in the Army as well. My little brother, who's bigger than me. My older brother, who's also taller than me, I'm like the runt of the litter at 6'1", served in the Navy, and he was on amphibs. He hates Marines. So, yeah, I don't know. But really, I share this with you because, my dad said the real heroes never made it home. Damn it. All this emotion going on. Marines don't cry. My eyeballs sweat a lot in this job, though. Although all the people at DPAA will tell you I actually do cry. I've cried more in this job than I've cried in my entire life. My dad said, men don't cry. I don't believe that, but, that's what I grew up believing. So I guess now at, almost 50 years old, I just let it all out. All that emotion I wasn't allowed to let out back then. This mission is really at my heart. When 3 years ago I said I would come in every day and give you my first and best, give the people of this agency my first and best. And I hope that I did that. I hope I contributed in some way to the progress, to the success. Really proud of the work we did on the issue nomination, which got us secured the funding. It was a team effort, but we worked really hard on that. And I kind of spearheaded pulling everything together and pulling the team together and working with the team for us to say, what money do we need with the resources we have to be able to execute more? And what that resulted in for us was really a $50 million increase over the FIDEP. And a majority of that went to operations for us to execute missions. So enough about, I'll just start getting more emotional if I keep talking about family there. Just Vietnam War is our operational priority. It is also my most challenging and my most resource-intensive mission. It really, from the field work, from the host nation payments, we work with the landowners where they have farms, and we pay the landowners for the use of that land. We restore that land when we leave. We hire host nation laborers, really do a lot of work as we think about legacy of war issues. And, our folks, I tell them before they go out, you don't just represent this agency, or if you wear a uniform, the service that you represent the United States of America. You are an ambassador for this country. And some people, all they know is stories they've been told about the war in Indochina, right, as they call it. So when they see an American for the first time, you're going to make a first impression on a generation that's going to last forever. And you only get one chance to do that. So the teams keep that in mind when they go out there. A majority of my operational funding for the regional directorates is dedicated to the Vietnam War. So as the Deputy Director for Operations, I oversee, the global mission. So it's the Europe-Mediterranean, our World War II losses in Europe-Mediterranean, throughout the Indo-Pacific, Korean War, World War II, Vietnam War for our major conflicts. And I will tell you, I know this question comes up a lot. When you look at the money, most of that money is going to my operational priority, which is the Vietnam War effort. The other thing that we are really doing, we have a unique statutory authority, and you heard from Mr. Gillette yesterday, our Partnerships and Innovation Branch Director. He really is doing a good job of developing a program that went from nothing to over 100 and some odd active partnerships today, right? And we are working really hard to increase partnerships with Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. We have really good success with partners in Cambodia. We have really good success actually in Vietnam. We have, it's called Scripps Institute for Underwater Oceanography. They go out and do underwater recovery missions on our behalf, and they have done several in Vietnam. And that is really just a force multiplier for us. It is something that we are striving to increase, not because we're trying to replace our internal teams with partner teams, but we want to augment the number of sites that we're able to go to and work. So again, just a force multiplier for us. So this is our summary for 2024. So 48 total field missions. So those are the recovery teams, the investigation teams. Pending, we have 6 in Vietnam, 4 investigation teams, and 1 partner investigation. And then in Laos, we talked about that yesterday, really just lost some ground there, but we are going to send an internal field team there later this year to get at least 1 mission. And next year, we'll talk a little bit about the robust effort we have there. And in Cambodia, we executed 5 field missions, 2 partner missions. We have the partners listed there, and 3 investigation teams. For comparison from last year, you say, well, how does that compare? Because this was after Congress approved our budget, after a few continuing resolutions with the budget plus up. Last year, FY23, we executed a total of 20 missions. So that was 10 in Vietnam, 8 in Laos, and 2 in Cambodia. So really, you see the increase in what we're able to do with that budget increase going into FY24 as we wrap up at the end of the year. And then our outlook for 25, again, looking at 43 field missions, 22 field missions in Vietnam, 19 in Laos, and 2 in Cambodia, to include some partner teams that we are sending to Cambodia. So really, like as we look ahead and continue that plus up of funding, we are looking at ways, how do we maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of what we do? FIG is taking on the mantle of kind of redesigning our mission planning and execution process so we can really put forth our best effort as we develop plans. So my responsibility is to take our agency strategy in line with our statutory requirements and develop a 2-year operational plan. Our FY25-26 plan is in staffing right now and should be signed off hopefully before I leave, but I'm throwing that out there so the boss maybe takes a look at it before. Just kidding, sir. But we have really looked at ways, how do we work better as a team? How do we maximize what we're doing and get the results that you all are looking for? And it's tough. The first year I was here, we made 1 identification for the Vietnam War in total. Last year or the year after that, we made 2. This year, and then last year we made 4. And this year we're at 3 right now. Is that right, Dr. Parr? 3? She's talking about something over there. She's not listening. All right. I think so, and the year's not over yet. So I'm hopeful that we are able to really see some more results from our effort in the Vietnam War. I wrote some notes down here last minute because a question came up about so right now we take in evidence from missions. Last year we took in 51 batches of evidence, so that includes possible osseous material and that includes material evidence. So this year so far we're at 49. So we are having some success, right? A measure of success. We are bringing in material evidence and possible osseous material. And sometimes the challenge with that is, if they're not certain, normally our team is really good in the field at determining whether it's human, non-human. Sometimes we're taking fragments, and if there's any doubt, that comes back to the lab, and they run that through what's called histology, which I couldn't even say 3 years ago. But they can look at the cells and tell whether or not that's human or non-human cells. And sometimes, it turns out that it's non-human. So it's still evidence that comes in, but we don't know until we get it to the lab to analyze that. But again, we really are just working really hard to improve what we're doing and to get the results you're looking for. You know, we continue key leader engagements. We talked a little bit about the Principal Deputy Director's visit to Laos. Our Indo-Pacific Director, Mr. Chris Phelps, was with her. A representative for our Partnerships and Innovation Branch was there, and really just talking about how we get after getting back to our robust operational schedule next year in Laos. Last year in September, we held our talks with the Vietnamese after an event at USIP, and had some success on some things that, you know, sometimes I wonder why we're getting pushed back on things, but I held ground on a few things, and we made some progress. They agreed for us to do things a little bit differently, so we hopefully get better results when we're out in the field. So those were successes. We recently had the Vietnam ambassador of the U.S. visit our facilities in Hawaii, Ambassador Zoom, and he committed to the importance of this mission, understands the importance of this mission, and committed whatever he can do to support that he will do that. In that lower right picture to you, that's me talking to the ambassador. And then you see ambassadors to Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, Ambassador Variava and Ambassador Murphy there on the left side when Mr. McCaig was in town having a visit there. So we continue to do these key leader engagements, which is why folks like Brendan, who is our desk officer, your desk officer, right, who really works to help us understand what's the U.S. government's larger role, how does that apply to what we want to do, and we develop our talking points to go out and try to advance our mission to the best we can. So that's kind of all I got for you. I'll save some time. Just some photos of repatriation on the upper right with our det commander in Vietnam, honorable carry, we call him. And then lower left is back in Hawaii being brought out. You see one of our underwater dive team members, and then a team in Laos there holding the POW MIA flag. But I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to serve you. Really happy that the Marine Corps accidentally put a lawyer in this job. So I haven't done any law in 3 years, so which kind of makes me happy. But it really has been the honor and privilege of my career, and this mission will remain in my heart. I will continue to monitor the Facebook and LinkedIn pages of DPAA, stay in contact with the friends and family that I've made here at DPAA, and do whatever I can to support and advocate for this mission, even though I won't be a part of it in the actual agency. But I will always be a part of it. It'll always be a part of my heart. And I just thank you guys. Love you guys all. I love you guys at DPAA. I appreciate what you've done. Thanks.
By the way, that was well-deserved. 3
you.
years ago Monday, we brought aboard a Marine colonel to head our Indo-Pacific Directorate, which has responsibility for all of Vietnam War, Cold War, World War II, and Vietnam War, Korean War accounting. In that capacity, we knew what we were getting. And it was a bonus because not only was he an accomplished Marine in terms of all things Marine in terms of operations, but he also brought a unique skill set of being an attorney, a lawyer, in the Marine Corps. So when we hired Colonel Brannen, it was done deliberately simply because he brought those two skill sets. And it was almost prescient from the standpoint that a year into his tour as our Indo-Pacific Director, we had a gap or hole in our Deputy Director for Operations, which is normally filled by a one-star general or admiral. We had a gap, and we needed to turn to somebody that we had complete confidence in, that could not only step into that critical role, but accelerate that role. And he's done an extraordinary job for us as our Deputy Director for Operations. I was so pleased with his first year in that new role that when the Marine Corps came calling and said, we need him back to become a lawyer for us, I said, please, no. Well, with the Marine Corps, nothing pejorative against either Colonel Brannen or those of you that had Marines, but they weren't taking a liking to my request. So this became a close-in knife fight. I went to the 3-star, who overruled the 2-star, and we got the extension. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. In the short time that he's spoken to you this morning, he just gave you a snapshot of the great work, extraordinary leadership that he brought to this mission. Not only did we bring in more resources to be able to do more, but throughout, he had many engagements with those senior leaders. I can't always be in Hawaii. Our principal deputy can't always be in Hawaii, so we rely on Colonel Brannen to be that very first face, whether it's an ambassador, whether it's a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Any number of these senior leaders, both U.S. and foreign, come through to see what it is we do, but more importantly, for us to tell your story, why this is so critically important. And they all come away moved, not just by, as Colonel Brannen said, the emotion of what it is we do there, but they're moved by the extraordinary talent and operational expertise that our folks bring to the table. Colonel Brannen heads that entire operational enterprise as he's had done for the last almost 2 years. Everything from the teams that deploy, to our medical section, to our laboratory, and he's done an extraordinary job. So this morning what I'd like to do is to present to him his end of tour award, which is very well deserved, and as you listen to the citation, you will hear why he is deserving of this award, and more importantly, why we are more than, well, I'll say it, not happy. But he goes off to do Marine Corps work. He goes back to the Corps, and as you heard him say yesterday, he will be the first or second division?
First Marine Division.
First Marine Division in California, leading there as a staff judge advocate to the commanding general at the 1st Marine Division. So we're very sad to see him go, but more importantly, we're very thankful for the legacy that he has left behind. As operationally proficient as he is, as legally proficient as he is, and all the skill sets that he brings to the table, what set him apart, in my humble view, is the fact, and you heard it this morning, and seen it, experienced it, he loved this mission. He wore it on his sleeve, and his heart was 100% into it. That's not always easy to do for the military people that come through DPAA. Many of them do, but sometimes they just land, they're there for 2 years, they take the mission away with them. Colonel Brannen wore this mission on his sleeve, giving his heart lock, stock, and barrel. Jennifer, if you could publish the order, please.
Ladies and gentlemen. You can? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand if you are able to. Attention to order. Colonel Christopher Matthew Brannen, United States Marine Corps, distinguished himself by superior meritorious service in a position of significant responsibility as Deputy Director for Operations, Defense Prisoner of War, Missing in Action Accounting Agency from July 2021 to July 2024. During this period, Colonel Brannen exhibited outstanding leadership and tenacious efforts, instrumental in spearheading all aspects of past conflict accounting operations globally for the United States government. His unparalleled skills and diplomacy created a great spirit of collaboration between the United States and the numerous partner nations, as well as the veteran service organizations involved in the highly charged and highly visible issue of accounting for America's missing personnel. Under Colonel Brannen's visionary leadership and emphasis on process improvement and technological innovation, the agency accounted for a record 489 missing American service members in fiscal years 2021 through 2023. The distinctive accomplishments of Colonel Brannen reflect great credit upon himself, the United States Marine Corps, and the Department of Defense.
I'm never going to forgive you for doing this, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for the applause. Please sit down. I'm going to take an opportunity. This award is a result of the men and women of this agency. Son of a bitch. Yeah, I got it. I pull myself together there. I hear my dad saying, like, what are you doing? It really, leadership isn't about being in charge. It's about taking care of the people in your charge. And, man, this has been awesome. It really has. And, I think, well, thanks. I think God gave us two gifts, or three gifts, really. I think the gift of worship, the gift of relationship, and the gift of work. And I got to do two of those things here. Relationship, actually all of them. The relationships that you build last a lifetime, and really just, gosh, I'm killing myself over here. My retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel back there is embarrassed for me. I love you, Chris. All right, he's not listening either. But really, I really approached this job not as a job, but as work that was a gift, and did my best every day to hopefully bring some answers to some families. Some of the team referred to me as the good idea fairy from time to time, because I was like, well, let's think about how we can do this differently. And I just really appreciate the support that they've given me. I tell you, I haven't seen people work as hard as I've seen people work at this organization, whether it was getting to visit a team in the field, doing what they do, our analysts and our outreach and communication folks who set these up and lead the effort, and then that team effort that has to come together to develop the case summaries. Right, there's so much that just behind the scenes to make something like this work, to make a field mission work. And this award really isn't about me; it's about those people, and it really has been a gift. The relationships that I was able to make, and then I everything I do, I try to please God, and I hope I did that. Thank you. Thanks. All right, now
now we're going to move on to the next briefing you're going to hear is Vietnam War Research and Joint Field Activities. I'll be joined on stage by Mr. Matt Kristoff, the Vietnam War Branch Chief, Indo-Pacific Directorate, and Commander Brian Sims, United States Navy, Future Operations Division Chief, Indo-Pacific Directorate. Come on up, gentlemen.
Okay, good morning. So that's a hard act to follow, huh? So what we're going to do here today is, as the Colonel said, show you some of the stuff behind the scenes and then how we operationalize it in the field. So I'll do the research and analysis piece and then turn it over to Commander Sims, and he'll talk about the joint field activities in the field. So, clicker.
My slide deck right there.
Yep. Are those yours?
Yeah, that's my slide deck.
Want me to just page through them?
If it goes to yours next, that's fine.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so our primary mission is to proactively develop these cases for investigation in the field naturally. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'll start with the whole research section of Indo-Pacific, not just Vietnam, but the research section itself covers Vietnam, World War II, Korea, and Cold War. And there are 82 personnel in this research section covering 8 different locations. So it's pretty big. It's a big thing to organize. I'm happy that my piece is just a small piece of a few people in Virginia. But the Vietnam component of that is about 27 people. And again, these are snapshots in time. People are always moving around. You've got people going into the agency, people leaving the agency. There's turnover that's normal and natural. So whenever you see snapshots and numbers, that's just a picture in time. So, but about 27 people are divided between our Virginia office here and our office in Hawaii. And that's just for the Vietnam team. Overall, all conflicts in Indo-Pacific, we're looking for about 49,000 people, right? The things that our analysts and historians do is, one of the things is augment teams in the field. So one of the guys on my team here in Virginia, young Air Force Captain Tommy Thompson, he's out with the team right now. In fact, they just arrived back in Hawaii a day or two ago. He was texting me, they got in okay, everything went well. But we try to send guys with field teams whenever we have that opportunity, especially if we know that analyst or historian's cases are being investigated in the field on that particular mission, because they know the cases inside and out. If something comes up that's just a little weird in the field, and it always does, you know, they can wade through that and figure out what the best thing is to do while they're out there. One of the things that they do when they're out there is they talk to witnesses, they try to get the right information out of the witness. It's completely different from writing a lead sheet and telling a field team that you want the team to ask the witness these questions. But when you're actually out there with the team, asking the questions yourself through the interpreter, when that witness is giving you the information, you can ask follow-on questions that maybe somebody on a regular team who doesn't know the case as well might not know. So that's why we like to send our guys out to the field whenever we get that opportunity. When they're out there with the witnesses, there's a certain art to getting information from folks in the field or in an interview. In the field specifically, we found over time that if we fly to a location with a witness, for example, say we put them on a helicopter, take them to where we think the incident happened, and we get on the ground and then we tell them, okay, we're here, you know, show us X marks the spot, so to speak. It's frequently not that simple for Vietnamese witnesses to get to a site that way. What we found over the years, And this isn't true just for Vietnamese witnesses. When we take Americans back with us, American veterans, we found the same thing. If they approach that location in the field, say from the south on a trail, when we take them back, we need to do our best to take them back to the location the same way they got there the first time. Because then as they're approaching it, things are starting to click in their mind, they're starting to recognize the area, and memories start coming back. And then you kind of leave them alone for a little bit. You let them think, you let them walk around and look around. And they're going through their own emotions at this point. Because no matter what side they were on, there are strong emotions involved with this. And we found that that's the best way to get information from witnesses in the field. So if you took that same witness, you just flew him to a hilltop and said, okay, what do you got for us? You know, a lot of times they have a hard time orienting themselves to where they are, how they got there. They may have approached from a completely different direction. The terrain has changed in 50 plus years. And so you get the best results from taking folks back there the way they approached the scene originally. And while you're out there, you have those witnesses help us collect any potential evidence that's out there. For them, it's a matter of pointing us to the right location, telling us some details that might not be in other reporting, and then the team that's actually doing, say, a site survey can take that witness information to heart, and it just takes them one step deeper into that investigation process. And one of the other things that we do, as you know, we've done a lot of meetings with families between these 2 days already. We're the main points of contact for sitting and dealing with you, speaking with you about your case, in addition to your service casualty officers. And I'll repeat this later, but frequently it's the family members that know the cases better than an individual analyst does, especially if a family's been really involved with that case for decades, and it's the only one you're working. You're going to know that case inside and out. And so what I always ask is, if you have information that you think we don't have, if you could please make a copy, get it to your service casualty officer so they could send it to us. Frequently, information like that, when combined with stuff that we do have in the files, is such a huge help that you wouldn't believe it. Frequently, it breaks a case wide open or takes it in a completely different direction that wasn't visible before. So I always ask that at every speaking opportunity. Okay. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the case progression process. This is on the research and analysis side of the house. So, research. So what are we doing? The research phase is really gathering a lot of information. And we do veteran interviews on both sides. So we interview U.S. veterans and veterans from the opposing forces, whether it's Vietnamese, Laotian forces, Cambodia. Frequently, for most of our cases, Vietnam War, we really don't need a lot of information. And again, this is a generalization. Usually we don't need a lot of information from the American side. We have that already. We need to know what happened to that guy or his remains after U.S. forces left that area. Who buried the remains, who moved them, what was the disposition. And so that's what we're looking for in these interviews. And the trick is figuring out who to interview. So we have to do a lot of research to figure out what was the enemy unit that was involved. A lot of times we know the regiments, that's a big number, thousands of people. We have to drill down into the subunits that were in contact with our forces. We call that order of battle research, enemy order of battle research, or OB. And that's very time intensive. You're going through a lot of written material, a lot of reporting. A lot of it's not real easy to read because the surviving copies aren't in very good condition. And so, but that's where it starts. And once we identify units down to as low a level as possible, we give that information to our counterparts in Vietnam, the Vietnam Office for Seeking Missing Persons, VNO SMP, and they go to those Vietnamese veteran reunions because they have reunion groups. and they start interviewing those guys. So it's the first cut of interviews. And so we might get a report, and I'm sure you've seen them. A lot of families here have seen them. We went out, you know, the report from the VNO says we went out, we interviewed 12 veterans from such and such unit during this period, and 3 of them may know something about this case, and we think a joint team should interview them at the next opportunity. And so that's how they identify those guys for us, and then we do a much more detailed interview with one of our joint teams. Archival research. So our case files for Vietnam War cases are actually fairly thick. They're pretty robust. Normally, we're looking through our case files to see what we think should be in there that isn't. Is there something missing? As opposed to our World War II counterparts, they're usually going to the archives and they're vacuuming up anything they can find. For us, it's kind of the opposite. We're looking to see if there's something missing that we think should be in there, and then we're going and we're doing kind of surgical research to try to find that if it exists. So we look at wartime reporting, archival imagery. So sometimes there's some existing imagery in the file already. The older stuff is not of the best resolution. The way the older stuff, and by older stuff I mean stuff that was acquired in the 1990s and the very early 2000s, they were really taking the method of acquisition back then. They were taking the equivalent of photocopies of negatives or photocopies of the film, and so the resolution isn't that good. What we're able to do now is we're able to take high-resolution digital scans of the negatives, and it takes about 1 hour for one frame of imagery. So it's very time-intensive. It's a labor-intensive endeavor, and one of the questions yesterday in the Q&A session asked about imagery. That was a capability of ours, the acquisition of it, that kind of went away during COVID because the archives closed and the contract ended. We are in the process of rebuilding that. We've got the personnel back on board. And after this event, we have some people on our team who will be training the people that will be pulling that imagery from the archives. Witness interviews, I've really already covered. Family member information, again, I'm beating the drum. If you think you might have something that we haven't seen, please send us a copy. Don't send us any originals ever. But, you know, send whatever information you think may help to us through your service casualty officer. And intelligence reporting. So intelligence coverage for the Vietnam War was actually pretty good. We have information from a lot of the different agencies. A good bit of that information is specifically correlated to cases, but the vast majority of it is not. So that it's a huge chore going through all of that and trying to make correlations years and years later. That's something that we've gotten a few more people into our section recently, and it's one of the things that we want to, now that we have additional people, get more people on looking at uncorrelated intel reporting. Prior investigations and recoveries are really important. A lot of times you think you might have a resolved case over here, and oh, it's a resolved case. Say we resolved the case a couple years ago. There's always a desire to make more room for material. So that's a resolved case. The assumption is we don't need it anymore. We could box it up and get rid of it, but you really can't. You need access to that because you might have a proximity case near that one with the same witnesses involved. They might not know it, but their reporting crosses over various cases. So that's something that we frequently look at, and you're trying to unwind reporting because the witnesses don't always know exactly what case they're talking about, especially if a lot of things happen in the same area. Moving on to the analytical phase. So we've finished gathering, and here's the phase that is really the most important, and sometimes it's the hardest to resource because you're always running out of time. You never have enough time. But during the analytical phase is when we're we're putting all this stuff together. We're writing case narratives. We're writing case summaries. We're looking at the imagery that we might have, getting some eyes on that to do some analysis of the imagery itself. And we're putting all this together with any other existing intelligence information. And once we do all of that, then you're in a position to figure out what you think you need to do next. Did this information give you any new leads? Especially if it's a report coming back from the field. What does that tell you? You know, negative reports are just as important as positive reports. So when they go to the field to a specific location and they don't find something, well, that tells you something as well. That's what I mean by a negative report also tells you something. It tells you that you're probably looking in the wrong area, right? So at this point, we start looking at mission prep. And we take these new leads that we want to do, and we start authoring documents in order to get these leads out into the field, because it's not automatic. Just because we think, the analysts and historians, just because we think we should do X on this case, that doesn't mean it's going to get resourced and done. We have to make the case. So we write investigation proposals. So we look at this information and we think we need to survey a particular site in the field, for example, with a witness. We have to write an investigation proposal and lay out all of the information outlining why we think this is a viable lead, why we think we should send people there, why we think our agency should spend the money to expend those resources to do that. We have to lay all that out. And then that gets peer reviewed by another analyst or historian. After peer review, it gets staffed and either approved or disapproved. If it gets approved, then that case is added to the Master Investigation List, MIL, the MIL. And then it'll go to the operational side of the house, which is Commander Sims and his folks. Same thing for excavations. So say we were out there investigating that particular case. We did a site survey. While we were out there, we found all kinds of stuff that confirmed to us it's the right incident, it's the right aircraft, the right location. We need to dig. Just because we need to dig doesn't mean the agency is going to agree and resource it. We have to make the case in writing. So we have to write an excavation proposal. Again, it's peer reviewed. There are lots of sets of eyes on this. And then it goes through the staffing process, and if approved, then that site gets added to the Master Excavation List, the MEL or the MEL, right? And at that point, again, we turn it to our operational colleagues. So there are some additional research support tasks that we do. And in addition to conducting archival research like I talked about, we also attend veteran reunions. For Vietnam War, again, like I said, we don't need a lot of information from a lot of different American units. For the most part, we've got that. But there are a small group of units whose veteran reunions we go to and other events that they have in order to try to talk to them. And that's because those units did not keep good records. Their records were destroyed. And so since those records were destroyed, their operational records, there aren't after-action reports to look at, and that's the kind of thing we need. So we're trying to talk to those guys and get as much information as we can from them while they're still around. They've been extremely helpful. We've got a lot of great actionable leads from them. They've gone to the field with our teams. They've led us to X marks the spot, and we've recovered and identified and returned guys based on them helping us. So we're very thankful, and especially that they're as cooperative as they are. Your analyst and historian is also the same person that answers inquiries that you send in, whether they come in straight through your service casualty officer, whether they come in as congressionals. All these things come in not only from family members, but the public. Veterans might send them in. Interested citizens might send them in. And so your analyst is answering those as well. And we support family member updates in the annual. So that's kind of obvious, but our family update schedule, our Southeast Asia annual kind of ends the big part of the family update season of the year for us. So between January and July, your analysts and historians are really writing case summaries in preparation for all the family updates and this event. So we had, I think, the list that I had 117 families sign up for this, and so they were, our team of about 8 folks was writing those 117 case summaries or summary memos, getting ready for this event. And when you consider the sign-up is, 6 weeks before the event, something like that, maybe a little bit more, it's a lot of work in a very, very brief period. So they've been, I think everybody's going to go on vacation in July. So we also work with coordinating support from partnerships and host nation investigators. The folks from partnerships join our meetings when it involves cases that they're involved in. We've really ramped that up in the last couple years, and that's been extremely successful. Being able to sit there with our partnerships folks and have them talk about what they can do, what they can't do, where they can go, what times of year are best, all that is hugely helpful, and it gives us additional capabilities that, like the Colonel said, it's a definite force multiplier. Same thing for the lab. The lab has been joining us for a lot of our planning sessions, and Dr. Parr, who I think spoke already, she joined us the last couple years, and the support that we've been getting from the lab has been phenomenal. And I really wanted to publicly thank them because, you know, a lot of times it seems like we're at loggerheads with the lab because we want to do something and they're saying you don't have enough evidence yet, and there's this back and forth tug of war. But from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank the lab for their support, especially Dr. Parr. It's been fantastic, and we greatly appreciate it. And the last thing I'll touch on really is twice a year we have case coordination conferences. And I just want to be a little clear on how we go about doing these. We do them twice a year. Each time we do over 300 cases. So it's 8 hours a day for a week, case after case. If a case was investigated in the field recently and a report came out, we're going to be talking about that case at the next coordination conference. What did that report tell us? Are we done with that lead, or do we need to do something else? You know, was it a positive lead, or a positive information or negative information? What are we going to do next? And so your case analyst is looking at all of the information on the case and that report, and he or she is prepping that case to present it at that conference. We're joined at that by all of our analysts from our Virginia office, our Hawaii office, our partners with DIA Stony Beach team, all of those folks come. We have representatives from partnerships, from the lab, as I mentioned, and it's one big team effort. Over the course of the week, we've got, at any given time, about 25 people in the room as we go through the cases, and when it's completely full, we get about 35 or 36 people in there. Also joined by our contractors doing various disciplines, whether they're anthropologists, archaeologists, writing case narratives, researchers. So as we go through these cases twice a year, if we're doing over 300 cases twice a year, we're not getting every single case done every year in a coordination conference, but we generally hit every case about every 2 years. If a case has been, one of the criteria that I look at when I'm putting the list together, if a case hasn't been looked at for over 2 years, I'm going to add it to the list, right? So that is how we do our research and analysis and kind of tee up the ball and get everything ready for our colleagues in operations to take that information to the field and operationalize it. And so I will turn this over to Commander Sims.
We're going to have to move on from here. We'll talk to Commander Sims later in the day.
Oh, okay. I'll turn it over to Mike Fowler.
Nice standing here.
All right, I'm going to be gone here. Matt, you left your folder, I think. Anyway, we are going to hear from an NGA here shortly, or within a minute. So I'm going to get off the stage. The director will make the introduction. Come on down, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker. Not quite cat-like reflexes, more like, what's slower than a cat? I apologize. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, for those of you that were here last year, much like that, I knocked over the flag. But I'm staying 10 feet away from it, so not to worry. We're very pleased to have with us today our next speaker. Vice Admiral Frank Whitworth. Whitworth is the director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, worldwide agency with incredible capabilities that protect United States and our partner interests all over the world. For those of you that are Blue Devil fans, Admiral Whitworth is a graduate of Duke University, and more importantly, he is a partner of DPAA's. We're very pleased to work with NGA and his team on, again, helping us to help you with all things related to the POW MIA mission. Admiral.
Thank you, Kelly. And thanks for this opportunity to speak today. It's such an honor to be here. So many family members of missing heroes from the Vietnam War. I'm humbled. I just want to paint a picture for you, not use a script. This morning, we had a 4-star commander of the U.S. forces in Korea. He also happens to be the commander of the UN Command and a Combined Forces Command with our South Korean allies. And he took time out and he came to say thank you to the 14,500 people we have at NGA. We had a really good discussion, a rich discussion. He gave a speech, and then he came up and we had an ops and intel update just like we do every single day. And we discussed the intel of the last 12 to 14 hours. Then we had a little bit of term intelligence. And there are so many things that are so important going on in the world, not just in his corner of the world, but also Russia, Ukraine, also keeping up with the pacing challenge of China, issues in the Levant related to Gaza. But there's nothing more important for me right now than being here with you. So I really appreciate this. It's my first time speaking here as the director of NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I'm really eager to do so. I'm proud to represent all of our hard chargers at NGA. And this morning I'd like to share with you just a little bit about how the U.S. has historically navigated conflict using insights from geospatial intelligence, or GeoInt for short, and I'll define that. Even long before the term GeoInt was ever coined. First, I'll provide a quick review of who we are and what we do. Second, I'll cite some examples of how mapping and imagery supported and continue to enable decision makers and military commanders all over the planet. And third, I'll close with a look at what NGA is currently doing in the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command area of responsibility. And yes, we will touch upon this specific important mission. Let's start with what I would consider NGA 101. Our motto. Our motto describes our work well. Know the Earth, show the way from seabed to space. We're a combat support agency, and I report to the Secretary of Defense by way of the Undersecretary for Intelligence and Security. And NGA is also one of the three-letter intelligence agencies that report to the Director of National Intelligence. We deliver world-class GEOINT that provides a decisive advantage to policymakers, military service members, intelligence professionals, first responders, and important causes such as DPAA. We have a workforce of more than 14,000 professionals. Half of them are in the D.C. area. 25%, and this will surprise you, are in St. Louis, Missouri. And the remainder are embedded in other agencies, combatant commands, and warfighting headquarters. Our job is to enable all of the critical actions and shape the decisions that impact our world through the indispensable discipline of GEOINT. And so let's define this. To define GEOINT, it's the use of imagery intelligence, and geospatial information broadly to describe and depict features, activities, and locations on the Earth, helping users visualize what is happening at a particular time and place. Our work is critical to three functions, and if there are three functions I would ask you to memorize, they are warning, targeting, and safety. Our GEOINT allows military commanders to know the exact location of U.S. forces, coalition partners, adversaries, and non-combatants. It also predicts adversary movement based on natural and man-made obstacles. For warning, just to further define, we try to baseline activities and behaviors out there in this world and then identify something that's changed, is anomalous, and might be concerning. And that's when we pick up the phone and we call somebody. And for targeting, largely contingency-based, but make no mistake, over the last 2 decades, very, very kinetic in some cases, sometimes non-kinetic, understanding nodes that are important to adversaries, ensuring that we can take care of them with precision, and safety, the one that probably is least understood and least advertised about NGA. Any plane that moves from point A to point B, especially if it's a gray tail, what we would call our military aircraft, with a lot of people inside, we take responsibility for the approaches into airfields to ensure that anything that is high enough and new enough to bring an unsafe situation upon that approach, that we document that. Every 30 days, we put out what are called flip charts. They're now electronic, that certify you're safe to go in here. Here's what you need to know. The same could be said in the undersea domain with our sailors who are in submarines or on the seas, and certainly from a land-based perspective, all the data that we use for charts for our forces. It's so important, and we don't say it enough. Let's go into some history. We like to say we go all the way back to our first president, George Washington. We actually claim him as someone who understood the important parts of our profession. That's because in addition to his other accomplishments, he was a surveyor, a map maker. He was a spy master. We also have ties to another founding father, Thomas Jefferson. He was an expert in many fields as well. Land survey was one of them, linguistics another. But most importantly for us, Jefferson commissioned the Lewis and Clark expedition and created one of the first cipher systems to transmit coded information in advance of the Louisiana Purchase. when that expedition was a covert mapping mission. For Jefferson, mapping was, as it is today, a vital intelligence activity. Now, we could, of course, talk about mapping and imagery in the Civil War. People may not realize that hot air balloons were used for photos in that war. World War I, World War II, the Korean War for hours. And I know your emphasis is going to be on the Vietnam War. There were tremendous contributions by our predecessors, including the Army Map Service, AMS for short, the Oceanographic and Charting Services of the U.S. Naval Hydrographic Office, tending towards the water in this case, and the Air Force's Aeronautical Chart and Information Center, ACIC for short. But a turning point in our community that I really need to mention, I can't say it enough, happened in 1962, and that was the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was the first conflict that played out in public that was directly impacted by and acknowledged to have utilized GEOINT concepts and tradecraft. Another of our predecessor agencies was NPIC, which is short for the National Photographic Imagery Center. And they analyzed data from imagery that came from U-2 flights in late August of 1962 and identified the installation of Soviet missile sites in Cuba. By October, President Kennedy and his civilian and military advisors learned that additional photos taken of those facilities revealed the presence of 6 long canvas-covered objects initially called unidentified military equipment. Further analysis branded the objects as Soviet medium-range ballistic missiles. The photos also revealed missile installations in a significant state of readiness for supporting transporters, command and control quarters, cables, and launch erectors. In the 7 weeks since the NPIC and analysts made their initial photo identification of those surface-to-air missile sites in Cuba, the Soviets had managed to ship and assemble an arsenal of offensive weapons with nuclear capability. Intense diplomatic exchanges followed in both official and unofficial channels, but peace would eventually prevail, thanks in part to the irrefutable evidence that NPIC had gathered and analyzed. GEOINT revealed the truth, and the Soviets backed down. Photographic interpreters clearly established the critical value of their craft, and that's now considered by many as one of the finest hours of the U.S. intelligence community. The earliest part of the Vietnam War began right around that time as well. In 1959, President Eisenhower had requested U-2 missions over Vietnam and the surrounding region, and tasked NPIC with an evaluation of the results. By 1962, NPIC analysts had begun conducting bomb damage assessments, identifying possible targets, and producing intelligence products. As demands for targeting information grew, along with the American involvement on the side of South Vietnam, ACIC, that term that we talked about with aeronautical charts, deployed a new database targeting system that helped American and Allied pilots evade communist air defenses more effectively and place their ordnance on target more accurately. Exploiting photography from the new SR-71 Blackbird, analysts could identify the exact coordinates of newly found targets and send that information to Allied forces to action. With the beginning of American ground combat forces in Vietnam in 1965 and 66, we found that the coastal charts based on old World War II data were inadequate, in particularly the Army's charts on the river deltas. They fell short. So, over the next 3 years, the Naval Oceanographic Office completed a comprehensive survey of that complex coastline and it used a series of survey vessels. And that office established a branch in Saigon to provide updated maritime charts and publications for use by local fleet and Marine Corps units in their blockade, interdiction, and naval air support actions. Back on this side of the globe, the Inter-American Geodetic Survey, or IAGS for short, assisted Latin American countries in professionally mapping their own extensive territories. World War II had revealed a lack of accurate maps in the Western Hemisphere. The primary mission of IAGS was to make the countries cartographically self-sufficient, so they started a cartographic school. And in return for that support, the United States gained access to all originally gathered data. It was a quid pro quo. Even though it was a mission that existed primarily before the Vietnam War, I bring it up because they conducted dangerous missions in helicopters and on the ground, and many of those aviators, engineers, and intelligence officers benefited from that background before serving in Vietnam. IAGS teams flew, climbed, paddled, and hacked with machetes their way across most of the hemisphere. One of the aviators from that group was retired Colonel Bruce Snake Crandall, who you may remember from the book We Were Soldiers Once and Young, or the film We Were Soldiers. Snake Crandall went on to receive the Medal of Honor for his actions in 1965 at the Battle of La Drang. He flew 22 missions that day in a Huey from 06 to 2230. Under fire himself, he evacuated 75 wounded soldiers and resupplied those on the ground with ammunition and supplies. He had to switch Hueys several times due to battle damage to those birds, and Snake is still around. He told us a few years ago that his IAGS experience was essential to his making that happen at La Drang. So getting back now to Vietnam, I'd like to discuss the Sante raid for a minute. In November 1970, after intensely studying overhead imagery for several months, the U.S. conducted what was simultaneously considered a successful and unsuccessful raid on a POW camp that was 23 miles west of Hanoi. Unsuccessful because POWs had been moved before the raid began. So it was branded by some as an intelligence failure, even though it was a tactical success, with only 2 minor injuries and the raiders killing more than 100 adversaries. It was also successful from a strategic point of view because it showed the North Vietnamese that the U.S. could bypass their air defense, get inside their country, and conduct a raid. And it was successful in another way, too. It forced the North Vietnamese to consolidate all of their POW camps, which improved conditions for our POWs. In some cases, it ended years of isolation and improved morale by many accounts. NGA and the tradecraft of GeoInt have a long-standing critical partnership with the Defense POW MIA accounting agency in support of military service members and families. Specifically, NGA's work in this space focuses on identifying potential areas where the service members were last identified, supporting DPAA's recovery operations through, 1, providing essential geospatial context to previous fields of war that have changed over time. 2, utilizing historical non-digital imagery to map these changes and assess ground and environmental shifts to inform recovery. And 3, applying advanced visualization techniques to include 3D capabilities to enable DPAA ground operations while recovery is underway. NGA is proud of this, and we are humbled to serve our nation's heroes and to fulfill our commitment to America's finest. In the last years of Vietnam, our nation's service, mapping and charting organizations combined to become the Defense Mapping Agency, or DMA. Over the next 2 decades, we saw the Berlin Wall crumble, the Soviet Union splinter, and the Warsaw Pact break up. After the balkanization of the former Yugoslavia, many hardworking cartographers and imagery analysts actually contributed to the Dayton Peace Accords, working to secure the borders of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And right after that, NPIC and DMA combined with a few smaller organizations to become the National Imagery and Mapping Agency, NEMA. Shortly after 9/11, the agency changed its name again, this time to NGA, bringing imagery and mapping together into GeoInt, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. And NGA was heavily involved in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. We've been there for every major military operation since. Today's GeoInt is faster, more reliable, and more capable than ever. We're around the globe, around the clock, from seabed to space. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Area of Responsibility is the largest one on the planet, now that we have SpaceCom, both from a geographic point of view and population-wise. And that includes the Korean Peninsula, which is always an exciting place to monitor. Witness our discussions today with General LaCamera. It also includes the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea, where we support the freedom of navigation for everyone who relies on clear and safe routes in international waters. It includes supporting our formal treaty allies, Australia, Japan, the Republic of Korea, the Philippines, and Thailand. It also includes important partners like New Zealand, Singapore, and of course, Vietnam. Just last month, NGA initiated the first commercial solutions opening to provide direct-to-warfighter commercial analytics to maritime domain awareness. This is a project known as Project AEGIR, A-E-G-I-R, and it will deliver the capability to find and track hostile maritime activities and help to ensure stability and security in the region, as well as a free and open Indo-Pacific, which benefits the entire globe. And yes, Vietnam will care very much about this capability. Let me close with the words of the late Lieutenant General Hal Moore, who co-wrote We Were Soldiers Once and Young about his Vietnam experience. On his return to Vietnam, more than 4 decades after the Battle of La Drang, he wrote, "There is no such thing as closure for soldiers who have survived a war. They have an obligation, a sacred duty, to remember those who fell in battle beside them in their days and to bear witness to the insanity that is war," unquote. We at NGA have a vested interest in taking care of U.S. and allied soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and Coast Guardsmen and their families. We will also continue to have a vested interest in what happens in Vietnam and the entire Asia-Pacific region. Our work ensures freedom and security across the globe. Mutually beneficial alliances and partnerships are crucial to achieving these goals. And I want you to take away from my comments a visualization of 14,500 people with me. If we get something that DPAA needs that we know could actually benefit the mission we're talking about here, we're picking up the phone. Okay? I want to thank you for having me here. It is an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope it's not lost on you that as daunting as NGA's responsibilities are, daunting, they still find time to afford their capabilities to benefit this mission and more importantly, you and your loved ones. Having spoken to Admiral Whitworth's analysts, who again have heavy burdens on their shoulders, to a T, they always say when they get to work on a DPAA project, they're just in literal awe of being able to do so. Admiral, on behalf of all of us, this is a copy of this year's National POW MIA Recognition Day poster with our thanks not only for what you did today, but more importantly, what you and your team do for us every day.
We're honored. Thank you. Thank you.